Hi, it's Nikki, and welcome back to Live a Little, your cozy corner of the internet where we discuss all of the in-between parts of life. The messy, honest, and unfiltered, where you may not always have that person to talk to about them, but here we do it all judgment-free. Welcome back. I have been doing a lot of overthinking and a lot of ruminating recently. As you have seen from the title, this week I wanted to talk about why I feel unlovable. Look, bit of a harsh title and a quite dramatic sentence to say out loud. It sounds like something you kind of think when you're in your feels and you're staring out the window when it's raining, listening to Adele, like I did do when I was younger and sometimes do now, but I don't really know another way to put it. I'm not saying that I don't have love in my life, because I have so much. I have my friends, I have my family, I have people who care about me, relationships with people that I really cherish, and I know that the love is mutually shared and people that show up for me over and over and over again. So I know that I'm loved in a lot of ways, but I think there's a difference between knowing you're loved and believing you're lovable. Especially, romantically, physically, desirably, in the way that where someone doesn't just care about you or admire you or feel protective over you or, for me, inspired by you, but actually wants you for you. And that is a bit harder for me to believe, because I think I've realized that I don't just fear rejection, I often expect it. I expect that I will be too much for someone, or not enough, or that my life and my circumstances will be too complicated, or that I'm not physically desired in that way. And that's uncomfortable to admit, because I've spent so much of my life and my career saying that you are perfect just as you are and you are enough, and that I embrace the things that have made me who I am. And all of those are equally true. However, I do think that feeling desired by people you'd like to be desired by in a romantic way is formative. We don't need romantic relationships in our life, because I think relationships with love can be equally, if not more important and more impactful in friendship and in family, in good ways and bad ways. However, I do think that it is a grey area where you can admit that romantic love is not the epicenter and the center of your life, because it isn't for me. I don't revolve my self-worth or my life or my anything really around, for me, boys or like male attention, men. But it is a part that makes you who you are, and it makes you feel good, When you like someone and you feel like they like you back, that makes you feel good. It's a normal human emotion to feel, and I haven't had that much in my life. I think that's been difficult, because this episode isn't really about a boy, but for me it's about, what gets unlocked in me when I want to be chosen. Because sometimes a crush, when I've had crushes, doesn't show you who they are. It shows you what you want to believe about yourself. Every time I've had a crush, I have almost dreaded it, like when I start to like someone, because I get a bit fixated on it. I don't know if it's more of like a lust thing or limerence, where I could do a whole episode on limerence. I won't probably get into it, but I get very confused with whether I like them, or I like the idea of them, or I like the fact that they're giving me attention when I'm not used to it. And so firstly, I find that very confusing. And then secondly, because I've never had a linear experience where it's been like, oh, we start talking, or someone comes up to you and says they like you, or makes a move on you, and then you naturally start dating, or you naturally start talking, and then, oh, maybe you're in a relationship or a situationship. I've not really had that in my life, and I'm nearly 22. So for me, as soon as I have a crush, my brain defaults to getting attached, because I've had an abnormal kind of gap in my experience with romantic situations than the average person, due to my circumstances and, unfortunately, my appearance, that then it hyperfixates on things, because all there is gaps to fill out with blanks, and all you have is, your head and ruminating thoughts. I've never been in a proper romantic relationship. I've been in, you wouldn't call them relationships. Like, I had a boyfriend when I was in year 8 for a few months, I wouldn't count that. that in my mind it defaults to, I feel like from a very early age, I thought that I was going to be alone forever as almost like a self-preservation. And so I think there's something interesting in the gap between decentering men. I've done a whole episode on that. It's actually the best episode and the most listened to episode of Live a Little this far because it's so relatable. And it's a big topic of conversation at the moment, in good ways and bad ways. But there's a gap between that and pretending you don't care about romantic attention at all. Because I don't want men's opinions to be the centre of my self-worth, because then I would not be half the person I am today. I don't want someone's attraction to me to become proof that I am enough. But I also do want to be liked and I do want to be desired. And I don't think those two things have to contradict each other. I think sometimes we talk about decentering men in a way that accidentally makes women feel scared or embarrassed for wanting love and attraction and romance and partnership, all of it. As if, the goal is to become so healed and so fine in yourself and content that you can never care whether someone likes you again or not. And I just don't think that that is real. I don't think that healing means you wanting to stop being chosen by others. I think healing means someone choosing you isn't the only way you matter. It's almost like it's a byproduct of you choosing yourself and an addition to what's already there and feeling content in yourself. And, I'm very, very lucky that I've grown up around healthy relationships a lot of my life. My parents are still together and have been married for like 30 years nearly. My sister's in a long-term relationship now. My brother's been in long-term relationships. He's in like a long-term relationship of 9 years. Probably will get married soon enough. And so I've been so lucky to be around so many healthy relationships, which I know is such a rarity and it's not a normal thing that a lot of my friends have been, lucky to grow up around. I have a lot of friends whose parents are divorced or they have complicated relationships or issues in their own relationships. But I think that only makes me, with what I've been around growing up, want that more, that companionship, that person that you can just kind of do whatever with, but also do nothing with. And I think that's when it's hard. I'm going on holiday on Saturday. When you see this, it'll be a few weeks after, but I'm going on holiday on Saturday and I'm going with my mom, my dad, my sister and her boyfriend, my brother and his girlfriend, and me. It reminds me of that meme that's like, and Steve, Steve. Steve. Because though they never make me feel left out, in times like that when each person has their person together, I'm very aware that I don't. And I know that logically my worth does not come from being desirable. God, I know that. But that doesn't mean it isn't you vulnerable to desire someone and not know if they desire you back. It doesn't mean rejection wouldn't hurt. It doesn't mean I'm above wanting someone to look at me and think, yeah, I choose her. Because the second I want to be chosen, a part of me starts preparing not to be. And I think the actual language for what I'm saying is rejection sensitivity, which I have in a major way. Like, I have a full subscription to rejection sensitivity. I'm on that train. And if you don't know, rejection sensitivity is basically when your brain is really alert to the possibility of being rejected. So you're not just expecting what's happening in front of you, you're also scanning for signs that someone is about to pull away, lose interest, choose someone else, or decide you're too much or not enough. I've been the same in friendships too. If a friend takes a bit longer to reply or their tone seems slightly off in a text, like they leave off a kiss at the end, I can immediately start preparing myself for the friendship to end. And in reality, they could literally just be busy or have a lot on their plate or, work as a lot or just not be on their phone. But my brain doesn't always go there first. My brain goes straight to, oh, okay, that's it. I'm just being left, or they don't care anymore. And a delayed reply won't just feel like a delayed reply to me. It will feel like the beginning of an end. A slight change in tone won't just feel like someone having an off day. It feels like evidence that I have failed or I'm not enough or that this relationship has come to an end. And when you have rejection sensitivity, uncertainty doesn't feel neutral. It feels like rejection being heightened up and warmed up. And the really annoying thing is that I'll often call that intuition, but I do have to ask, is this intuition or is this rejection sensitivity trying to protect me? Because sometimes I'm not reacting to what someone has done, I'm reacting to what they're about to do. And I think that's the hardest part, is that I'm basically preparing myself for something that doesn't even exist. And I think if you have had, tumultuous relationships growing up, maybe that's with your parents, maybe that's with your siblings, whatever your situation is, you are more preparing for conflict, or you're preparing to be left behind. And I had that a lot, not in my family. Oh my gosh, my family have been ride or die for me, as I am them, which I'm so lucky for. But in friendships, I've had a lot of either toxic relationships or relationships where I think people found it very easy to kind of pick me up and drop me. And so then rejection sensitivity becomes so much louder because you become more scarred by experiences you've had in the past, and therefore it's kind of like a fight or flight mode, but based on your relationships with people. And so I think that's what my brain does with rejection sensitivity. A feeling appears, and instead of letting it be the size that it is in my brain starts enlarging it. It's like the feeling is an image, and my brain just keeps pressing zoom and enlarge, enlarge, enlarge. And delayed reply isn't just delayed reply anymore. It becomes a sign. Then it becomes proof. Then it becomes a whole story about me being too much or not enough or embarrassing myself by hoping. And suddenly, something that started as a small moment has filled my whole view. And I'm not able to see past it and be logical. And then I start analysing someone or their words or the way they phrase something like it's a GCSE poetry anthology. What did they mean by this? What is the significance of the full stop? What does the absence of a kiss suggest about the speaker's emotional state? Sometimes a feeling is just a feeling, but my brain treats it like an image and keeps pressing enlarge. Enlarge, 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 until it takes up the whole screen. And suddenly I'm analysing someone's words like they are an anthology. And I think part of the work is learning when to zoom back out, not to dismiss the feeling completely, but to see it in proportion again. To be able to say, okay, I acknowledge that this feeling is big, but is it big? Or has my brain just enlarged it? I think one of the weirdest things is that I do know I'm loved. And that is kind of the paradox of what I'm talking about. I know I have people who care about me, but feeling loved and feeling desired are not always the same thing. Feeling cared for and feeling wanted are not always aligned. And that's where I think a lot of my stuff sits. I have a facial difference, and I've grown up in a world that is not exactly subtle about what it considers beautiful in its limited ideals of perfectionism. And social media and media standards have not helped with that at all. And even though I can logically say that beauty is much more complicated than that and so much less skin deep, I spent my whole life learning that beauty is not what the book cover is about. I also have internalized things, and it doesn't mean I haven't looked at other people and thought, that's who gets chosen. That's who gets picked first and gets the attention. And I hate that idea that, that's someone easier, because that's the fear, is that I am complicated and that someone will go for someone that is easier to understand or is more linear or is easier to explain. I remember saying to my friends at school, I had the idea in my head that, like, if I got into a relationship, like when you're talking to someone, you always show your friends like an image of what that person looks like. I had this massive fear, I still kind of do, that like if I got into a relationship or started properly talking to someone, said person is going to show their guy friends like, oh, I'm talking to this person. They're going to show their guy friends an image of me, and all of their guy friends are going to be like to them, bro, why are you talking to her? And like, look at her appearance and all of that. And though I'm like, they can jog on and like, then that said person needs better friends and this, that, and the other. Equally, that is like a real massive fear for me, is that if I'm with someone, they'd be embarrassed to be with me. And I talked a lot about this in my episode with Katie Piper, and Katie was like probably my favorite episode yet in how aligned I felt with every single thing she was saying. Though our stories are different, they also are very similar. I think because I've not yet had someone that wholeheartedly kind of champions me in a romantic way and is like proud to be with me. If anything, I've had the opposite. If I've had romantic sort of situations, unofficial things, I just have a massive idea and preconception in my head based on like kind of what I've experienced thus far. And also just my brain, ruminating on stuff that isn't even there. That someone would start talking to me and be like, oh yeah, this is fun, this is going great. And then the people around them would basically be like, why are you talking to them? And then they'd get embarrassed and then it would just, I don't know, the relationship would fail. I've had a lot of therapy about my medical stuff that I've been through, but I do feel like there is probably a lot in therapy I need to work through about my rejection sensitivity. So yeah, I think even if someone is kind, engaged, or interested, like I struggle to trust it. And I think there is a part of me that thinks there must be another explanation for why you're giving me attention. Maybe you do feel bad. Maybe you like the idea of me. Maybe you like talking to me, but wouldn't actually want me. And that is the belief that I'm trying to challenge, but it's really hard. And if I'm being really honest, I think another layer of this is my health, because as soon as my health gets bad, I spiral quickly, and that can make me feel really unlovable. Not because anyone has told me I am. If anything, I'm surrounded by love in those moments. But I think when you grow up needing extra care, extra time, extra patience, extra appointments, extra everything, you can start feeling like a burden even when no one treats you like one. My parents have had to give up so much for me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that, and I'm so lucky to have them. Somewhere along the way, I've internalized the idea that loving me means giving something up in your life. And that is such a hard belief to bring into dating. And that's what I remember when Katie Piper said in our episode together about how people put up with so much in relationships. People deal with toxicity, chaos, disrespect. And just because my things are visible or medical or concrete doesn't mean that they make them any worse. I have friends that have been in relationships that are toxic and like they have issues to deal with day to day. So if anything, I'm not choosing them. I'm not hurting someone on purpose. But, having needs doesn't mean I'm a burden, and it means I'm human. And I really struggle with that idea of believing that, like, I won't be too much for the right person. And that's what I've really struggled with is I feel like I'm too much for everyone at times. My shit is too much to take on. And I wouldn't want someone to take that on because I don't want anyone to resent me for that. And I think then another layer of this is the job that I do. So if a boy is talking to me, even in a friendly way, my mind goes straight to they're using you. Not because they've actually done anything to make me think that, like not like they are trying to like get my industry contacts or get me to post them on social media, but because my brain is already trying to explain why someone would be interested in me. And it always has to be for the wrong reasons or an ulterior motive in my brain. That's what it short circuits to. And the explanation that I often reach is, well, it can't just be you. It has to be that they want something that isn't actually you. And so when you feel unlovable, even being liked can feel suspicious. If someone doesn't want you, it confirms the fear. But if someone does want you, your brain starts asking, what do they really want? But maybe not every person who comes close to me is actually looking for something. And I've realized that a lot with my friendships. Not every connection is transactional. And maybe some people actually do just enjoy me. Not the idea of me, not the job, not the access, just me. And I've never felt like enough my whole life. So the idea of someone actually just appreciating Nikki has been a hard thing to believe. And some of this is honestly just bigger than romance. This is obviously a lot of this is to do with just my complications with, romance and things like that. But sometimes I think I'd actually feel the same if I was being picked for a football team in PE. Waiting to see if someone likes me back kind of feels the same, which sounds ridiculous, but also not really, because it unlocks that same feeling, that same internalized belief of I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not going to be chosen. Like my brain is already standing there in the PE hall thinking, okay, I'm going to be picked last yet again. I knew that already. I prepared for that in my mind already. And that's what I know. That is the status quo that I'm used to now. And there are so many ways the same feeling can show up maybe for you. Maybe it came from school. Maybe it came from always feeling like the odd one out. Maybe it came from being compared to other people or feeling like you had to prove why you deserve to be included or that you were enough. Because you're not just thinking, does this person like me? You're thinking, am I the kind of person people choose? And that is a painful question to carry. So maybe part of healing is learning to separate the current situation from every old version of not being picked. They don't define you. This is one moment. You are one person. They are one person. It is not a referendum to tell me and define whether I am lovable. If you believe everything is awful, your brain will start collecting awful things as evidence. And I think I do that with being lovable and feeling like I'm lovable. If my core belief is, or anyone's core belief is, I'm not going to be chosen, then suddenly everything gets painted with that same brush. Someone being busy can be proof. A small moment of uncertainty becomes proof. And then it becomes a vicious circle of all of these things add up to the self-fulfilling prophecy that you aren't lovable. But the strange thing is, believing I'm lovable can sometimes feel more unbelievable than believing I'm not. It's like it's stranger for me to believe that I could be loved wholeheartedly than believing that I just will never have that. Romantically, the idea that someone could genuinely want me and not because they feel bad, not because they want something, but just because they do, and that just, it starts and ends there. That can feel and does feel more unrealistic to me than the idea that they wouldn't. And I think that's what self-sabotage can look like sometimes. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes self-sabotage is just only trusting the story that is difficult and hurts. Because maybe my brain isn't always showing me the truth. Maybe sometimes it's showing me the story that is practiced and has been believed the most. So what am I trying to do differently in spite of all of this? I think what I'm trying to practice is pausing before I believe the first story that my brain shoves at me. So if someone takes longer to reply to me, instead of immediately going, they hate me, we're no longer friends, I'm trying to go, okay, what else can be true? If we think logically and zoom out a little bit, what actually could be the case? They could be busy. They could be tired. They could still like me, but also have a life. They could have shit going on in their family. They could be having a bad mental health day. They could be, at the moment, at my age, some people at university, they could have an essay due. It's very annoying, but honestly, people have shit going on. And I've got shit going on. I'm never expecting people to, I always apologize for taking a while to reply, but life happens. And if my health is bad and I start thinking I'm too much for anyone, I'm trying to ask, is that true, or am I feeling vulnerable because I need more care and attention right now? I don't think the goal is to never spiral because I'm a Cancer. She's very emotional. She has PTSD. She has severe anxiety. Like, that's not my life. That's not going to happen. My brain loves a spiral. She has a loyalty card to spiraling, and overthinking city. But maybe the goal is trying to catch myself in those deprecating self-destruction thoughts a bit earlier, to notice, oh, okay, I'm not actually reacting to what happened. I'm reacting to what I'm scared this means. And that tiny gap really matters because in that gap, maybe I don't have to turn uncertainty into rejection, but just, though rejection may feel familiar, it can be a friend to me, not an enemy. So I think that's kind of what I want to practice, is kind of learning that rejection doesn't have to be a bad thing. And rejection is a part of life. It's not even just in a romantic sense, not being someone that's chosen for a job, not being someone that people want to be friends with. We all face rejection in day-to-day life. And I actually think we don't expose ourselves enough to it. We've all become very comfortable in our bubbles, that actually building, I guess, like a familiarity with rejection and seeing it as like a friend rather than an enemy and something that actually builds you up rather than breaks you down is really important. I think that, rejection can actually really help you shape yourself. And so, obviously, not all rejection is good, and it hurts when you like someone and they don't like you back, or something has ended in a way that you didn't foresee. But I also think that every rejection does teach you something. And so I'm trying to see it for the friendly side of what it can be, and build that up, basically. So, my little thought of the week is when you start to feel yourself spiraling, or that you're unlovable, or that you're not enough, which is very easy, especially when you do truly in your heart of hearts know that people love you, which I do. I'm so lucky to have so many beautiful relationships around me. It is just that my relationship with myself and with romance and with rejection is something that I really need to work on. So when you notice yourself doing that, where you're kind of calling something intuition, like you have a bad gut feeling about something, or you know something to be true just because it's a familiar thought or feeling, when it actually might just be fear, that idea of, oh, I have a bad feeling, maybe it's just an old wound being pressed or being triggered than it actually being true. And then maybe you're not sensing rejection, maybe you're remembering it, and maybe you're not seeing proof that someone doesn't like you. Maybe you're looking through a belief that says they couldn't. And I don't say that to ignore red flags. People do not ignore red flags, but if someone hasn't actually done anything wrong and your brain is already writing the ending where you are unwanted, maybe pause and ask, what is happening right now? Or am I preparing for someone that has hurt me before? Sometimes it's not intuition. Sometimes it's fear wearing intuition's outfit. And the work is learning the difference between a red flag, an old wound, and what you know to be true. And I think just be kind to yourself. When I've spiraled, especially when I've had a crush on someone, every blank that I fill in is a negative. I'm not kind to myself. I'm not a friend to myself. I go straight to like, well, yeah, they've not replied to you for a week because they don't like you, Nikki. But then the other part of my brain goes, but they did this and they did that and they did that. The devil on my shoulder or whatever will always kind of fulfill that hole more than the angel on my shoulder. But it's learning that rejection doesn't have to be a bad thing. And just because someone gives you silence doesn't mean that, it's a bad thing, basically. So I think that's everything I wanted to say. It's just something I've been thinking about a lot. I feel like every time I have a crush or I have a new relationship with someone, I go straight to everything that could go wrong with it, or that they couldn't just love me for me and there has to be an ulterior motive. And I think it's learning to sit comfortably within that rejection doesn't have to be a bad thing, and that love comes in all different forms. And so I think when you are going through that I'm unlovable spiral in romantic relationships, it's even more important to hone in on the ones that are there that are platonic and are, familial. And yeah, if this episode has resonated with you, I hope that you take this as permission to be a bit kinder to the parts of you that panic when you want something. Wanting to be chosen is vulnerable, and letting yourself hope is vulnerable, especially if a part of you has spent years believing you are not the kind of person people choose, which I have done. You are not hard to love just because you needed care. You are not undesirable just because you haven't been chosen yet. And you are not behind just because your timeline looks different. You are allowed to be inexperienced and still be desirable. You're allowed to be scared and still open. You're allowed to want love without apologizing for wanting it. So with that being said, I'm sending you love if you resonated with this. And as always, remember to be kind to yourself and live a little.